What is up, card fighters, and welcome back to the Prime Vanguard channel. Y'all know me, I was too damn lazy to make an intro, so I decided why not just showcase what we're going to be learning today, which is Gandeeva. Now, very recently I did a Gandeeva deck profile showcasing the deck I took to win top 16 with at the Kingslayer Crows Cards event in Georgia here, and with the new support from the most recent set of DBT12 Evenfall Onslaught, I want to show some of the smaller changes I made to Gandeeva as well as my approach to it and how it's changed. With that being said, I'm ready to showcase to you guys all the changes I made with Gandeeva. Now I'm playing the Gandeeva ride line simply because I didn't want to play more cards in the deck that were grade 3 based. And the Gandeeva ride line, while it is great because it takes a card out of your deck, so essentially is this instead of, just like minusing a card. This doesn't take up any soul for your other grade 3s. 2, it also means I can make space for my other grade 3s that I want to play, as the new support card is a grade 3 and you want to max it out. So I went back to the Gandeeva ride line. You get a free superior call under certain conditions, free ride up to this, and then counter blast for free for the Vanguard. Everybody knows what it does, pretty straightforward. Alright, and then obviously you're still playing 3 copies. The main star of the show, Scarlet, Flame, Marshal, Dragon, Gandeeva. Gandeeva is actually still extremely powerful and still really popular right now. The control aspect of this card, as well as the fact that the new support card gives you another way of binding cards, or not just from your drop zone, but from other places as well, means that you finally have every aspect of control in this deck ready to go for setting up your bind. You can bind from drop zone, bind from field, you can bind from hand now. There's nowhere in the deck where you can't bind the cards needed to get up to the 5 to 6 count right away on first turn, which means that the critical is more accessible to you than it used to be prior. For my next grade 3, I'm playing 4 copies of Scarlet, Flamebow, General, Strigna. Now, until we get the actual confirmation of where this card stands at in the English ban list, you still need to play 4 of this. It's the only card in your deck that actually still lets you bind 2 cards. Still the best way to get up to your 5 card bind, as well as get some more control onto the field. And now for the new guy, we have 4 copies of Scarlet Flame War General Balden. Now, Scarlet Flame War General Balden has not been featured prior, so this is his effect. Continuous deck. While this card is revealed by the ability of your Vanguard with Gandeeva in its card name, this card is also regarded as a grade 1 and 2. Auto Rearguard Circle. When this unit attacks a Vanguard, if you have a Vanguard with Gandeeva in its card name, bind a card from your hand face down. Choose one of your opponent's rear guards and retire it. If you did not retire a card, draw a card, and this unit gets 5,000 power till the end of that battle. Now, Balden is amazing. You are no longer going to be running into those awkward situations where your opponent has 2 units of the same grade, even if they do with your retiring aspect cards. This card just means it's where that if you have it, called out from the Gandeeva effect, you increase your chance of retiring more stuff, which will trigger your other cards, as well as increase the amount of stuff that you have in your bind. The best aspect of this card is the fact this card lets you actually bind a card from your hand face down, which means that if there are any dead cards in your hand, you can now convert those into face down bind targets, which means that you increase the power of your stuff, and this unit also gains power itself, which means that with another card in the bind, this becomes a 20k attacker on just a 1 card bind, and then naturally become a higher attacker as the game passes on with Gandeeva's effect. I definitely do think this is a 4 of. I wouldn't recommend dropping any of your free binders down whatsoever. I know it's another grade 3 in the deck and it does hurt, but the fact that, again, you convert your dead cards in your hand into more bind, as well as the fact that he's a beat stick, and he's a card that touts himself as 2 different grades, as well as being a grade 3 as well, potentially means that with the help of this card, you can just get a full board wipe without having to worry about missing out any targets and retiring your opponent's cards. Alright, for my last grade 3, I'm playing 4 copies of Best Harvest. Naturally, the only reason why Gandeeva is still one of the strongest decks in this format, you drop that Best Harvest with the new Balden, you essentially guarantee yourself a full board retire if your opponent has all different grades, that +3 bind, +3 draw. It's insane. This card still buffs up your hand by a huge amount. It's really good to hold on to this in the early game, especially with how much faster decks are becoming and where the meta is going. I definitely think that Best Harvest is still for this deck, it's mandatory. I didn't bump it up despite taking out the Gandeeva order because, again, this is already a lot of grade 3s that you're playing in the deck, and I just don't want to boost my count up any higher of that. But if you're that scared of not hitting it, I would just, again, take out one of these to play another Best Harvest, but I personally haven't had an issue finding this card. Moving on to grade 2s, I am still playing 4 copies of Drag Ritter Alpha Card. Now, we all know that Drag Ritter Alpha card is the other card in the Gandeeva deck that lets you do the extra 4 attacks. You get to use its effect, counterblast 1, bind it, call something else out. The cool thing is that now that we have Balden, we have more cards during the battle phase that increase our bind count. This card will bind itself, Balden gets you their bind, and it lets you actually fix your hand, because if your hand is Or if your drive checks are bad, Balden, lets you dump those bad cards and again convert them to something new, as well as get more power for himself. For my next grade 2, I'm still playing 4 copies of Blast Artillery Dragon Brachial Force. With more grade 3s in the deck, you definitely need something to fight back in the early game with, and it's more important than ever now. So because people are extremely aware of the new support that Gandeeva has, the fact that you're probably playing more than 12 grade 3s in the deck, they're going to assume that your early game hand is pretty much fake and they'll start rushing you. So Brachial Force there to apply that early game pressure and convert itself into card advantage potentially, as well as knock off some more of your opponent's pieces prior to going into Gandeeva. Valuable in the early game. For my last grade 2, I'm still playing 2 copies of Scarlet Flamebow General Rugant. Again, this is another extender into your Gandeeva play, another card that helps you increase your bind zone. This one, costs a CB, but you combine it with Strigna, 3-card bind, right there, right away, just ready to go. Moving on to my grade 1s, I don't play much now, but I did cut Scarlet Flame Bow Soldier Bosun down to 2. In this deck, you're not really CBing much outside of Gandeeva and Alpha Car, and your first turn CB is already free, so it was okay to reduce this card to 2 to make space for Balden and keep the best harvest at the rate that I did, because 9 times out of 10, your front row is so strong already that the booster doesn't even really matter because your attacks are just, high enough to be scary. And if worse comes to worse, you can choose not to use this if need be, but usually this is only good for the counter charge to increase your bind zone anyway, and with the new stuff like Revolve and other cards gain more power for their effects, it doesn't matter as much. Next I have 4 PGs, 3 Buckler Dragon, and then 1 copy Elementaria. My trigger lineup has not changed whatsoever since my last tech profile. It is 3 copies of Burning Flail Dragon, 4 copies of Conduct Spark Dragon, 1 Dragon Empire OT, 4 copies of Flare Veil Dragon, and 4 copies of Rona. Now my trigger lineup, I actually feel way more confident now considering the fact that how fast the meta is and where we are going out with new decks. I actually think that 4 draw triggers is more important than front triggers, despite the fact that yes, you can increase your power, you don't have boosters anymore. However, drawing into those pieces, hitting those best harvests, hitting that Strigna, it just matters more. And if your opponent's going to be beating you up in the early game, I'd rather hit draw triggers in the early game defensively and boost my hand up while you're beating me up than me just get power to the front row that I don't even have yet. And to be honest, I've honestly been thinking about taking out one of the crits to play another draw trigger, simply because since Gandeeva already has the crit and your rear guards now have power and you're able to convert your bind zone every single turn by +3 from my experience, I just feel like the additional draw trigger with the critical pressure on the Vanguard already, it's too high, and you just need to make sure you're hitting those pieces and making sure that your hand is big enough to keep up with the other decks as they get more support later on in the future meta. Now that is my take on Gandeeva after the support of Evenfall Onslaught. Thank you so much for staying tuned out the entirety of the video. Let me know your thoughts about this deck in the comment section below, as well as any changes or suggestions to me on how I can make this deck better. I will say though that this is pretty much the same Gandeeva, it's just a little bit faster now. You do play more grade 3s, but it's honestly worth it. The power up, the binding from hand, knocking out those dead pieces, converting into just hitting your opponent harder just feels way more satisfying, considering the fact that Best Harvest is a fantastic card that always comes into play when you need it to boost up your hand, as well as the additional draw triggers.